With new formats being added every so often, it can be hard to keep track of exactly which cards or which sets you can play in each format. So I'm going to break down the 7 different constructed formats you can play, what cards you can play in each of them. It's going to help you keep track of things and work out exactly which sets you might want to collect cards from. Here we go. Welcome back to the channel. It's been a couple of weeks since my last video. I've had a good couple of weeks off in the run up to Christmas, which was very, very much needed. But now we're back and we're going to break down the 7 different constructed formats and the cards you can play in each of them. So if you want more content like this, don't forget to like this video if you find it helpful and subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss out on those future videos. You can probably tell I've had some time off considering I have these quests, 3 750 gold quests. I haven't even re-rolled one today. It's the late on Tuesday and I haven't got any weekly wins. I've fallen behind slightly on my collecting, but I don't think it's going to make that much difference. If you ever need time off away from the game or anything, don't worry about what you're going to miss out. Seriously, it's just not worth it. Okay, we'll catch up with that. So we have 7 different constructed formats that we can play. And we have Standard, which there's best of 1 and best of 3, but we're going to ignore that. We have Standard, we have Alchemy, we have Historic, we have Explorer, and we have Timeless. Now they're the casual queues, but you also have exactly the same in Ranked. And then we also have the Brawl queues. So we'll go through exactly what you can do in those. And then on Brawl, we have Brawl and Standard Brawl. Now, in case it's confusing, because they did change this recently, Brawl used to be Historic Brawl. That's the 100 card version, similar to Commander Singleton format, where you can play Historic and Alchemy cards. And Standard Brawl used to be called just Brawl, is the 60 card standard only version of that. So I'm just going to refer to Brawl as Historic Brawl. It's just much easier. It saves us from getting confused between one and the other. So let's break down what we can do in each of these formats so you can figure out exactly which cards you might want to collect. So we're going to start off with Standard. And Standard is technically cards from the last 3 years of Magic the Gathering releases, though sometimes there are releases that don't come under Standard. But in general, we have sets that come out about every 3 months, so about 4 sets per year. And at the moment, going back to Standard, we don't have the last 3 years because we skipped a rotation. We haven't quite got to 3 years yet. It's still kind of 2 years. We're going back to Innistrad Midnight Hunt, which was September 2021, currently 2023. So it's last 2 years. So we have Innistrad Midnight Hunt, Crimson Vow, Kamigawa, Nuka Penna, and then Dominaria was the next September 2022. So we have that, The Brothers' War, Phyrexia, we have March of the Machine and Aftermath, which is kind of one set, but just broken into 2. And then we have Eldraine, which was September 2023, and we have Lost Caverns of Ixalan that came after that. So the last 3 years, we're actually going to have some more sets coming out, and then up until September 2024, when the next set comes out in September 2024, we will lose these last 4 sets that came out in September 2021 up until Dominaria was September 2022. So just before that, those 4 sets will drop off. So like I said, that basically covers any normal release, which are pretty much scheduled every 3 months. There will be other things that are released on paper, and there are some sets that are released into Arena that aren't standard legal. So not everything will be added here, but those main sets will be roughly for a year, unless there happen to be an exception like March of the Machine and Aftermath being essentially one set split over 2. So Standard is pretty straightforward. We're going to move on to Alchemy. So then in Alchemy, we have these sets from September 2022 onwards, from Dominaria United, because Alchemy are cards essentially from the last 2 years, but they also include, it says here, some digital-only cards and cards that have been rebalanced. So there are, some very specific Alchemy sets that come out. It also includes the Arena base sets, so those starter decks you get right at the very beginning. Those first ones that include some basic cards. They don't want to keep changing those. They keep the tutorial and the 5 single color starter decks the same, so they're part of the base set. Some of those cards might be useful in Alchemy, but they have to be included somewhere, and they're not in Standard. And then we also have specific Alchemy releases that match with the Standard releases. So when Dominaria United came out, we had Alchemy Dominaria Brothers War. We have one of those. For Phyrexia All Be One, we had one of those. With March of the Machine, it was a bit of an exception because the Aftermath set basically filled the slot of an Alchemy set. We didn't get an Alchemy set for March of the Machine, but otherwise there would be one normally for that. We've got one for Wilds of Eldraine, and we have one for Lost Caverns of Ixalan as well. And as you can see here, we have the exception. We had one last year as well, which was the Baldur's Gate set. And now we have Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, that came out in summer 2023, which was an Alchemy-only set. Well, actually, not an Alchemy-only set, because it was released in paper, but on Arena, it was not standard legal. So it does include some things that are rebalanced and changed in Alchemy, which don't affect what's actually happening on paper. So there's a bit of a discrepancy between Lord of the Rings on Arena and in paper. Mostly Orcish Bone Masters and the One Ring, the most important ones. But essentially, when this came out, it was, for Arena purposes, an Alchemy-only set, which obviously goes into other formats that also include Alchemy, like Historic, mostly. So that's included. It's not in Standard, and we had that in the summer. So next year, we might well be getting another Alchemy-only specific set. You have to watch out for those. If you only collect Standard, and a set comes out that is not in the normal kind of 3 monthly cycle, or for whatever reason seems to be different, you might find there is one that happens to not be Standard that comes out. But yeah, so it's important to recognize those. Alchemy also includes rebalanced cards, which basically means if a card is performing too well and it isn't worth a ban, or they don't want to give out a ban, then they will just reduce something, take away something from that card. Might make it cost a little bit more. They might make it slightly lower in power or toughness, or they might take away an ability, like with Kumano Faces Carcazan. In Alchemy, it had haste taken off it. It wasn't quite as powerful a card as it is. When a card is rebalanced and made not as good in Alchemy and Historic, it's generally a good sign that in Standard, if the card's still there, if it is a Standard legal card, it's probably a good one to play. Probably overperforming. And then you have other rebalanced cards that are boosted in Alchemy. So they might be made cheaper, they might be made slightly stronger, or they might have an extra ability added to them. In that case, if you find a card that has extra added to it in Alchemy, it's probably underperforming in Standard, and it's most likely not a card worth using. So if you happen to use cards like that, find they're being added to, it's a sign, that card is slightly underpowered. But yeah, that's everything that is available in Alchemy. It has a shorter rotation than Standard, but because we have these extra sets, and they are mostly rare cards, they only have a few uncommon cards. They're not very big sets, they're quite small, but they are mostly rares and mythics, and they are quite overpowered. In terms of building a collection, although Alchemy is only 2 years and Standard is 3 years, the number of rares and mythics that is worth collecting, or that you should collect in Alchemy, is probably about the same. And also the fact that there are a similar number of rares means it's actually harder to collect Alchemy sets as completely as you could collect Standard sets. Because with Alchemy sets, you only have 2 years to collect all the cards before they start rotating out. And with Standard, you have 3 years to collect a similar number of rares, so it's quite a bit more spread out. So Alchemy does tend to be slightly higher power level with these extra rare cards that are pretty powerful and a little bit harder to collect. Most people hate it, some people like it, and Wizards of the Coast like to push it as much as possible. But basically, that's Alchemy. The next format that we have is Explorer, and Explorer is basically like Standard Plus. It doesn't have the Alchemy cards in there, but it does have basically Standard and previous Standard sets as well. Now, Explorer is technically Arena's Pioneer version. It's as close to Pioneer as possible, and it's getting closer and closer to, which is a paper format, if you're not familiar with it. It is getting closer and closer to Pioneer with all extra sets that are being released. So if you like Pioneer in paper, Explorer might be what you like to play. So we've got highlighted here all the current standard legal sets. So from Lost Caverns back to Midnight Hunt. And then we have some specific Explorer/Pioneer sets that have been released. So things like Khans of Tarkir, Shadows over Innistrad that have come out that were never in Standard. And we also have other things that were in Standard previously, like Adventures in Forgotten Realms, Strixhaven, and Going Down. Kaladesh Remastered, which was an extra one, and Amonkhet Remastered, but Core Set 2021, Ikoria, Theros, Throne of Eldraine, Core Set 2020, War of the Spark, Ravnica, Guilds of Ravnica, Core Set 19, Dominaria, Rivals of Ixalan, and Ixalan. I believe they were all the standard ones that came since Arena has been around. And then we also have these other bonus sets, which are the anthologies, which are other specific cards from Explorer or Pioneer, which might be useful if you want to build decks, just specific ones that are taken out. So we have those that come up every so often. Now, they normally come out in the store, and you can just buy them directly, rather than them being sets that you collect and buy packs for. They're just specific ones that you can buy. So that's Explorer, going back all the way to Ixalan, with some extra cards, trying to get as close to Pioneer as possible. It's getting there. I'm not an expert in Pioneer, but I believe it's getting pretty close. If a few more things are added, then the majority of Pioneer types of decks should be there. Let me know in the comments if you know more about Pioneer than I do, and how close Explorer is actually getting and what you think about that. But that's the intention behind Explorer, at least. Obviously, with all the extra sets compared to Standard or Alchemy, because there's a lot of sets here, the power level is higher, there's more synergies, there's more combos, and being able to collect things from these sets is technically harder because there are more cards available. Like, you're not going to have a complete Explorer collection as easily as you can have a complete Standard collection. There's so many more sets, but each deck is still only 60 cards, so if there is a Standard meta deck that has the majority of cards are rares and mythics, and you have an Explorer deck that has a similar ratio of rare cards, then it's not any harder if you're using wildcards to craft the Explorer deck than it is with the Standard one. And the benefit you have with the Explorer deck is that it's not going to rotate out. That's the benefit of Explorer and Historic. Things aren't ever going to be not legal anymore. So if you're collecting Standard and Alchemy, and you find that maybe you don't play enough, cards start rotating out and you miss them and want to play them again, maybe you can build something similar in Explorer or in Historic, and then those cards won't rotate out and you won't have to stop playing with your favorite cards. I personally like Standard. I like how things change every year or two. New decks come out, old decks leave. You have to kind of learn new tricks with new combos and everything. I kind of prefer things moving along. I kind of feel like it doesn't get quite as stale that way. If you're playing an Eternal format like Explorer or Historic, you might see the same type of deck today you'll see in 5 years' time because the deck is still around. So there are benefits to Standard and Alchemy. There are benefits to Explorer and Historic. These are just the cards are available in it. Okay, so we're going to move on to Historic now. And Historic is basically the Alchemy Plus version. It's everything that you can play in Alchemy going back, and things haven't rotated out. So these are all the cards from Explorer as well, still highlighted, all the different sets from Explorer. And then we have the Alchemy specific ones that we had before from Ixalan, Lord of the Rings, Eldraine, Phyrexia, Brothers War, Dominaria. And then we've got cards that are not currently legal in Alchemy, but came from Alchemy in the past year. So Baldur's Gate set, Yucapenna, Kamigawa, and Innistrad, which covers Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow, was basically a joint one for the first kind of Alchemy-specific set. And then we have a few extra things that have come out in Standard sets. So you might have seen when you open packs from the Wilds of Eldraine, or if you're doing drafts from Wilds of Eldraine, You will every so often see these Enchanting Tales cards, which I think are only enchantments, but you can have a look at those. And you'll see these Enchanting Tales cards, which are cards that are not standard legal. When you're opening a pack, if it's a rare or a mythic, it doesn't take up the rare or mythic slot from that pack. It takes one of the common slots. So you're not losing out on value in terms of rares from packs. If you happen to get that, if you want to pick them up from drafts, you can pick them up in drafts as well. They're just not standard legal, but they're cards you might want to play in Historic. We've got the Multiverse Legends that came out from the Phyrexia set as the kind of extras, like the Enchanting Tales. We've got Shadows of the Past with the bonus cards from the Shadows over Innistrad when it came out. Retro Artifacts came from the Brothers' War, and Mystical Archive came from the Strixhaven set. So basically, every so often, these sets will just include old cards. They're not standard or alchemy legal, but they're just extra ones that can add to your collection and can build out a collection in Historic as well. And then just like, we have the arena-based set as well, same as in Alchemy. And then just like in Explorer, where we have those anthologies, we also have Historic anthologies, which are basically the same thing. You can buy them in the store when they come out, or you can craft them. I don't believe you can get these in any packs or any other way unless something comes out in the future. And they're just other specific Historic legal cards that might be useful when you want to build Historic decks. You can, like I said, buy them in the store. And then we also have Jumpstart, Historic Horizons, and Jumpstart, which are also legal in the set. So compared to Explorer, we do have all these extra ones again, which enable different combos, enable some extra things that you can't do in Explorer. And you have all the alchemy cards as well. So again, the power level is going to be one step higher than Explorer. There are more cards, there are more rares, they're slightly overpowered, although it does include rebalanced versions of those cards. When they're rebalanced in Alchemy, they're rebalanced in Historic as well, unless there's an exception. So you'll find that overpowered cards will be pulled back a bit, and underperforming cards will be given a bit of a boost, make them a bit more viable. Now, it used to be the case that Historic was kind of intended to be every card that's available on Arena. At least originally that was the intention. But there are some cards that are banned in each of these formats. Some cards are not in Historic. So Wizards of the Coast came out with the latest new format, which is Timeless, which is literally every card on Arena. So if we have a look through the sets, it's the same as Historic. It goes all the way down. There's no extra sets that are available in Timeless, but there's also no ban list. So in Historic, you have certain cards that are banned. In Explorer, you have certain cards that are banned because they're just overpowered and enable crazy combos. In Timeless, nothing is banned. We only have 3 cards that are restricted, so you can only have 1 copy of each of them because they are entirely broken if you have 4 copies. Those cards in Timeless that you can only have 1 copy of are Channel, Demonic Tutor, and Tybalt's Trickery. You can still use them, but you can only use 1 copy in your deck, which helps to pull in those decks that would use them just to take over the game in the first few turns, or do some ridiculous game-winning combo. So because we don't have cards that are banned, again, compared to Historic, the power level is even higher. Being able to collect all the cards, well, you'd have to have every single card on Arena, so it's not the easiest thing. If you're free to play, it's going to be very tricky. If you want to spend money, you might be spending a lot of money if you want to collect every card. But obviously, like we had with with Standard or with Explorer or any other format, if you're playing with 60 cards, you don't need to have every card on Arena to build a really good Timeless deck. You just need to have enough wild cards to build one deck that you want to play with, and then you use that as long as you want. It doesn't rotate because there's nowhere for the cards to go. They're always legal, so you're never going to lose anything like with Explorer and Historic. So if you like Eternal formats and being able to play with pretty much anything at all, Timeless might be the format for you. There's a slight extra complication with the rebalanced cards, that you can use rebalanced versions of cards in Timeless, but you can also use the original versions of cards in Timeless as well. So just pick whichever one's more powerful, basically. and you just use that one. So that's the 5 main formats, and then we have the others: Standard, Brawl, and regular Brawl. No, it's not. Standard Brawl and Historic Brawl. It used to be called Historic Brawl. Now it's just called Brawl. They're just trying to confuse you. Standard Brawl is a singleton format, which means you only have one copy of any card apart from basic lands, unless there's an exception, and you have a commander card, which is a legendary creature or planeswalker, and then you have to build your deck around the color identity of that card. To show that more clearly, basically, if you take something like Skrelv, which is only white, and put Skrelv as your commander, then you can only play white cards. You can't play any other colors of cards. If you pick a creature that has 2 different colors in the casting cost, like Dennick, then you can use white cards, you can use blue cards. You can't use anything else, because that's the color identity of Dennick. If you use something like Etali, which only has red in the casting cost, but does have an ability for green, then you can use red cards or you can use green cards in your Brawl deck with Etali. And if you choose something that just happens to have all 5 colors as an ability, even something like Hyodai, then you can use any colors. So you can use white, you can use blue, black, red, and obviously green. Because you can use everything in there. It doesn't have to be in the casting cost. As long as the colors are somewhere on that card, that is the color identity of that card. So normally it's a singleton deck, so you only have one copy of each. If there's an exception that says you may have multiple copies or an unusual number of copies of a certain card, then that rule overrides the singleton rule. There's nothing currently in standard as of making this video that overrides this rule. There are some things in historic that would do that. As for sets that are legal in Standard Brawl, it's exactly the same that is legal in Standard. Everything from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, which is the most recent as of recording this, going back to Innistrad Midnight Hunt that came out in September 2021. When we get to September 2024, then the Innistrad sets, Kamigawa and New Capenna, will all rotate out of Standard Brawl, and obviously we'll have new sets, and the oldest one will be Dominaria United. But that's the basics of the Standard Brawl. Now to Historic Brawl, which is now currently called Brawl, is Historic Brawl, as far as anyone else will probably refer to it, is actually very similar, but it's a 100-card singleton deck instead of only a 60-card singleton deck. And it is using all historic legal cards. Obviously has a ban list as well, because there are certain things that break the format and can't be played in it, otherwise it would kind of ruin the fun for everyone. But apart from that, same rules apply with a commander. You can have something that is single coloured, something that's multiple coloured, and whatever the colour identity of that card is, other colours you have to build your deck around. The sets that are legal in Historic Brawl, basically the same as what's legal in regular Historic, the 60-card constructed format. Everything there, including the anthologies, and all the alchemy cards, and all the like bonus cards, Enchanting Tales, Multiverse Legends, all that stuff, that is all available in Historic Brawl. So if you like Commander, this is the closest thing to Commander you're going to find on Arena. It's 100 cards. You have a Commander card. It's not exactly the same. You have 25 life instead of 40, but it's the best we're going to get on Arena at the moment, as things change in the near future. One of the differences worth pointing out between Brawl, which is Standard and Historic Brawl, and the other constructed formats, is in the normal 60-card formats, you have to have a minimum of 60 cards, but you can go up to 250 cards. In Brawl, which is Standard Brawl and Historic Brawl, you have to have exactly that number of cards. So Standard Brawl has to have exactly 60 cards, and Historic Brawl has to have exactly 100 cards. And yes, that is including the commander. So technically it's your commander and 99 other cards. There are some cards that break the rule, the singleton rule, in the format. To things like Rat Colony that specifically say a deck can have any number of cards named Rat Colony. That overrides the singleton rule, so if you want to, you can build a deck full of Rat Colonies, which is the cheapest way to make a historic Brawl deck, but probably the most boring, though relatively effective. But you can do that, and you only actually need to have 4 wild cards to be able to craft the full collection of Rat Colonies, and then you can put 60 of them in your deck if you really want to. which makes this officially the cheapest historic Brawl deck ever if you want to get in with it. It's really boring to play, but it kind of does the job, it kind of works, and it is incredibly cheap with only 4 wild cards required. And then also you need a legendary black creature, which could in theory be anything, but could potentially be a rat or something with other synergies as well. And we've also got things like Dragon's Approach, not quite as effective as Rat Colony by itself. It does say a deck can have any number of cards named Dragon's Approach, so if you really want to, you can put as many of these cards into the deck as possible, and it won't break that rule. And another one I remember from not too long ago, Seven Dwarves, a deck can have up to 7 cards named Seven Dwarves. So you can, even in a singleton format, have 7 copies. If you want to add 8, it won't let you. 7 is the most you can have. So yeah, there are some cards that break the singleton rule. Let me know in the comments if there's any other ones you know about that I've missed. But effectively, like, you can do it, but there's a reason why it's meant to be a singleton format, and things like 7 Dwarves might not be the most powerful thing to add to your historic Brawl deck anyway. It's also worth mentioning, if you care about ranked, getting your constructed rank up, potentially to Mythic, get those extra packs, you can play ranked in only Standard, Alchemy, Historic, Explorer, or Timeless. You can't play ranked in Historic Brawl or Standard Brawl, at least at the moment, so they're more casual for, and the other 5 tend to be the more competitive ones. Although don't forget, because winning is relatively highly incentivized in Arena, people are still playing Historic Brawl and Standard Brawl games to win. They just might be playing it in a more fun way rather than, strictly the most efficient way. So that covers the basics of these 7 different constructed formats and the things you can play in each of them. Let me know in the comments if I've missed anything or if you have anything else to add to that. And thanks for watching this video to the end. It's really helpful for me, really shows your appreciation and support for the channel, so I'm so grateful for that. If you do want to support the channel anymore, then I do have a Patreon, which you can have a look at patreon.com/GameSchoolDadMTG, where we have extra bonus content and monthly giveaways as well, so check that out if you want to support the channel anymore. And don't forget, if you haven't already, like the video and subscribe if you haven't, because it really helps out as well, and I really appreciate all of your support. So thanks for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.